The United States has decided to aid the Syrian opposition with weapons, and the former United States ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford, said that he expected a move by Obama's administration to change the balance of military in Syria. Mr. Assad is making reckless decisions because he doesn't want to be overthrown. If he crushes the rebels, he continues to run a minority-based government faced with a large, angry Sunni majority, possibly causing terrorism. If he loses, there is a concern that minorities would be massacred in revenge, violence, and repression, and that the civil war would just continue among the Sunnis. Syria should reject military intervention from the United States because there would be an increase in violence and there would be a risk of more chemical weapon attacks. There has even been United States soldiers that do not want to fight in Syria. Also, the civil war will eventually die down and become less violent over time. If Syria decides to ignore U.S. intervention, or if the United States decides not to intervene, the projected outcome could be that they could possibly resolve the issues between the people and their leader, and there would be more peace.
The regime is fighting a financial battle. Business is plummeting, and that is making inflation soar. When rebels took over the cities, they took a good chunk of Syria's oil and agricultural land. The two main sources of government revenue fell into rebels' hands. Although greater poverty means Syrians need more government services, closures of schools and hospitals owing to fighting have cut the demand for funding. There are many obstacles that we need to overcome, such as 2.5% population growth, 250,000 job seekers each year, but still at 30% youth unemployment. Drought has led to agricultural issues, so the land isn't as resourceful as it used to be. Corruption because of the lack of regulations on big businesses. Unemployment has skyrocketed, and oil productions are down. To help with the overthrow of Mr. Assad, there are a couple of things we could do to help. We can provide aid to schools, hospitals, and government services, pay off the Syrian rebels who took control of the northern cities, in hopes that the rebels will take the money and give back the land so the government can start profiting off of it, even though there is not much to profit off of. If we provide aid to schools, hospitals, and government services, then hopefully we can educate more people, even though they already have a high literacy rate, and help them stay healthy so they can boost their economy. Once that is done, we will have educated the people enough that they can overthrow their own government, and hopefully the rebels will return back the land and hope that the government can gain money from that land.
In Syria, humanitarian aid is desperately needed. Thousands of Syrian civilians have been killed during sustained government airstrikes, along with bombs which have destroyed most of the city. The violence is now beginning to spread to Lebanon and Iraq. Only 9 million of the estimated 25 million Syrian civilians have been able to flee the country due to financial circumstances. Government blockade, along with fighting, as well as Mr. Assad refusing to cooperate with the UN, are all impairing humanitarian aid from getting to Syrian civilians. Most of the time, the Arab Red Cross is not allowed through at Syrian checkpoints, causing millions to suffer from starvation and disease. The United States will continue to try to work through blockades and are using all methods possible to deliver aid to those in need. They are attempting to use channels such as the United Nations, international and non-governmental organizations, and local Syrian organizations. The U.S. is focused on helping citizens and refugees in neighboring countries. Hopefully, if we continue to work with the UN, Mr. Assad, and other humanitarian aid forces, the people of Syria will be provided with the necessary supplies to allow them to live through the war in Syria, so they can one day go back to their normal daily lives without worrying about food, shelter, or medicine.
Over 2.6 million Syrian women and children are being subject to abuse, oppression, and human trafficking. These terrible acts of torture are taking place in abandoned refugee camps and even beyond that. Human trafficking seems to be the biggest problem, as many civilians run away to escape the war front. This issue can be solved and prevented from happening again by addressing the human rights violation going on in Syria. The international community needs to take action immediately. The community should strongly warn Mr. Assad and bring to his attention that he will be held responsible for allowing this to take place. The inferior treatment of women and the immense power of Syrian forces poses the biggest obstacles in this issue. With the civilians already helpless, government forces are taking advantage by humiliating them with impunity and sexually harassing young children during home invasions. With the help of the international community, the abuse of women can gradually decrease to lower levels. With a little support, women will gain the confidence to stand up against the abuse. With the cooperation of the UN, we can definitely help the women in Syria rise above their fears.
The Obama administration is trying to figure out whether or not it should arm rebels with weapons to take down Mr. Assad's regime. The concern is what consequences would occur if these weapons fell into the wrong hands, such as those of terrorists. The weapons could then be used against the U.S. and its allies.
There are many obstacles that might occur if we were to use lethal aid to help take down the regime. It is possible that once the rebels have been armed, that they can be used against us. Past decisions by the U.S. to arm rebels in Libya, Central America, and Afghanistan, just to name a few, help sustain brutal conflicts in those regions for decades.
The plan that could be used to end the issues in Syria is that Obama decides to not arm rebels with weapons. Although it could possibly take down Mr. Assad's regime, it could also possibly affect those that are innocent that disagree with the rebels' ideas.
With the correct decisions, no rebels will be armed with lethal aid. There is a chance that if armed, the rebels will destroy the Syrian regime, bringing the country to peace. But there is also a chance that it could backfire. If the terrorists take control over the weapons, then the country is going to become even worse. So to avoid all of that, it is better not to provide lethal aid at all.